Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going to be looking at how the CBBC's news programme Newsround decides to tell kids how they are terrible if they happen to be white. Because they decided to come out with this article today, White Privilege, what is it and how can it be used to help others? And it starts off straight away with a video of 4 non-white people telling us just how difficult their life is because they're not white. Let's take a look.
If you were to ask my friends to describe me, they'll probably tell you that I'm funny, that I'm kind, that I'm gentle. But growing up from like year 6, like the ages of 10 and 11, people who didn't know me would just assume that I was dangerous.
Now at this point I just have to say that this is a complete grift from black people at this point. Well, sorry, I should specify, black grievance academics. I'm just going total war on this type of rhetoric because I'm just so fed up of hearing it. All my friends think I'm lovely, nice and whatever, but if people don't know me, they'll assume bad things about me. Yeah, guess what, sunshine? People assume bad things about me too. I've had people cross the streets when they see me approaching. I've had women put their purses on the other side of their body away from me because they assume I might take it. Guess what? I do the same thing with strangers because you can't be too careful. So to just think it's because you're black is effectively just a type of racial narcissism, which, as we are going to go through, is clearly all that this is about.
Like I remember going to shops as a 10-year-old and having security guards follow me around or asking to search my bag before I left. And it was because I'm black.
How do you know that? How can you possibly know that? I've had security guards following me around before. It's just what they do. And if you come in with an already full bag, guess what? This happened to me before. They'll sometimes check it and compare it with the receipt. Did you get unjustly detained for that? Do you have any evidence other than you are a black man that this was due to racism? No, you have absolutely none. Yet the BBC will put this video out there, to kids by the way, as if it's fact. Because guess what? Kids don't have the mental capacity to start actually questioning these types of things properly. They will just, and I know this because I used to watch Newsround and read it on the website, and my idiot 10-year-old brain wouldn't question anything. It would just say, oh, the BBC has said this, therefore it's true. And I'd wager that a lot of kids are still like that these days. So they're just going to take this at face value, even though Kahindi Handrews lies.
I'm Matilda and I'm both black and mixed race, which means that my dad is black and my mum is white.
So you're white and mixed race too? I do love that phrasing. I'm black and I'm mixed race. No, you're just mixed race. You just happen to be half black. But there's obviously a reason that she's mentioning I'm black and mixed race. It's because saying the black part gives you privilege. Saying the white part doesn't. And that's the really funny implication of this. At the end of the day, as I said in the title of this video, all this is really trying to tell you is that white people are vile. Being white makes you bad. That's the ultimate aim that they are trying to get out of this, and whether BBC Newsround know this or not, it is still something they are pushing, and it's why I'm very glad that I do not have a television licence. This is an iPlayer, by the way, television licence, people, therefore I'm free to watch it.
Hi, I'm Sam and I'm black.
Hi, I'm Orla and I'm mixed race. My mum is Asian and my dad is white, but when people look at me, they usually think I'm white.
Right, retain that bit of information. Retain the part of the information where she acknowledges that most people think she's white, because I thought originally she'd be the white representation for this panel, and it turns out no, actually. She's the Asian representation for this panel. Because, of course, they're the only 3 options for race in the universe. It is, of course, black, white, or Asian. There's no more, it's no more complex than that. We just have 3 groups. And apparently the right wing are the ones oversimplifying race.
And we're all from Fill in the Blanks and Reroute It, campaigns working to have people of colour's history taught in every school in the UK.
I mean, I have my problems with history being taught in schools. I don't think the curriculum's particularly good at teaching any real sort of useful history. I mean, for God's sake, one of the answers that's acceptable for saying why did the British invade India was apparently to get curry spices. And so while I'm not against having some sort of foreign history being taught in schools, can we at least fix the curriculum for British history before we move outside of British history? Because at the moment, if I can't trust British history being taught in schools, you can be damn sure I do not trust foreign history being taught in schools.
I'm Shaniqua from Newsround, and I'll be asking everyone here today, what is white privilege?
So, white privilege is an unearned advantage that white people have that people of colour don't have.
I mean, to start off, I just have to say, I don't know why the music's so loud. You should not have loud music when your panel's audio is not the best quality, and especially when it's not particularly loud. And that is indeed the mot argument for what white privilege is. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even think it's unreasonable to say that something like that could exist in society, and maybe even does exist in society. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to say. It's certainly a hypothesis that should be tested out, but the problem is, when they come to actually getting into the detail of where white privilege is applied and where it occurs and how white people have advantages, it's either the most benign phenomenon you have ever heard of in your life, or it is the most ridiculous lie you have ever heard, that the whole idea of white privilege just isn't worth looking into at all. And they're going to go in exactly why. Did I poison the well there? I absolutely did, but I've done enough videos on white privilege and black grievance arguments to know that even if I do poison the well, you don't even particularly care. And if you're new to this, and you've not heard of white privilege before, you've clearly been living under a rock, I have to say. But the well's probably already poisoned for you too. So anyway, let's have a listen to what they actually have to say about white privilege.
And it all comes from years and years and years ago, hundreds of years ago, where white people wanted to go across the world and take resources from other people's countries.
Resources that were still in the ground and not at all being tapped into, either because these other people didn't have the technology to actually get the resources out of the ground, or they didn't even realise that these resources were even useful. And even then, the idea wasn't that we're white, we deserve these resources. The idea was, okay, we've got a company, we want to make money, we're going to come into this what is effectively virgin land and set up what we need to here. We're going to make colonies here, because you clearly haven't even set up a system of government. You're still just a bunch of tribes having constant wars with each other, and even wars with us, as the film Zulu quite clearly shows. However, the BBC here is implying that what it was that effectively the British Empire was just a load of pirates, which, to be fair, in the early days of the Empire we were just a bunch of pirates, but that was specifically against the Spanish, Portuguese and French. When it came to Africa, I mean, the Dutch got there first. They tried to say, hey, we're going to trade with you, here's a bunch of farming equipment, do you want it? And the African chiefs said, no, not really, we want those guns because it's easier to, guess what, win wars and capture slaves to trade with you. So when we have someone here on the panel saying we want people of colour's history to be taught, it's obviously going to be absolute nonsense like the history we've just heard.
And that they realised that they could pretend that they were better than everybody else just because they were white. Slavery has ended, but those ideas have stayed here in the UK and across the world, and have meant that white people still have some advantages over other people of colour.
I have no doubt in my mind that there were quite a few people in the days that you are talking about, if we just want to be specific about it. It is the 18th to early 19th century, who thought that they were superior because of their skin colour, although really, in those days, especially when it came to the British, they would say the British race rather than the white European race. Because really in the 18th to 19th century, and even to the early 20th century, race was just a synonym for ethnicity. It's an Americanization that race means the colour of your skin. That's why there were two different words for racist in the 60s going into the 90s, because we used to have the word racialist, which was the bad one, that meant you are discriminating against other people because of the colour of their skin, and what racist used to mean was effectively just xenophobia. And those are obviously different things, but every person on this panel, we can only assume, maybe the BBC Newsround presenter thinks differently, I doubt it to be honest, but they obviously think that xenophobia and racism are literally just the same thing. Which they're not. Xenophobia and racism have completely different mindsets. In fact, I don't even believe xenophobia is necessarily irrational. I think there are perfectly rational reasons to be wary of people from other countries.
White privilege happens in ways that we might not even notice sometimes. So for example, if I'm drawing a picture, I'm trying to find a crayon that matches my skin, I might have a harder time finding it because I'm black, whereas a white person will be able to find it easily.
No, I think white people would have the exact same difficulty as you trying to find a black skin tone. Of course, I'm being facetious there. I know what he is really saying is that when you have crayons for skin tones, you will probably more likely find a white crayon than a black crayon. Which, as I said before, you are either going to have a situation where it is the most benign thing known to man, oh, I'm finding it slightly more difficult to find the correct colour that I want for my drawing, or it's something that is completely made up. And this is, of course, completely made up, because every time you buy a set of skin tone colouring pencils, the skin tones go from black to albino. But it is pretty amazing how the idea of white privilege goes from slavery, and you come to the modern day, and white privilege is all about finding the correct colouring pencils for the black skin tone. Because that is just how much we have solved the issue of anti-black racism, by the way. Their biggest problems are all made up.
Same way, if I was to cut myself or injure myself, I need a plaster. For me to find a plaster that matches my skin tone, it would be harder than for a white person.
See what I mean? Exactly the same thing. Oh, I'm going to find it slightly more difficult to find a plaster that tone reflects my skin colour rather than a white person's skin colour. Yeah, that's probably true. But if that's your biggest problem, and if that is what you're saying white privilege is, what the hell are kids gonna think? Because I don't even think most black kids will have even thought about that, and I don't think most black kids will have even cared. But the whole point of this is that they are trying to get kids to care. They are trying to get kids to think that if they are finding it hard to find a plaster matching their skin tone as a black kid, that means that they are suffering from racism, because they want them to think that the entire country is racist. And clearly the only way they can do that is by lowering the bar to the Earth's core when it comes to the standard of racism.
One way that I definitely noticed my white privilege when I was younger was if I was ever with like an official, like going through security or something with my mum, we'd have a passport together. And if I ever went with my dad, it would never get questioned, nothing would ever happen. But when I was with my mum, I'd always get asked, oh, is this your child? And there'd always be a sense of like that my mum is a bad person for what she's doing, or that I wasn't her child, even though we literally have the same name on our passport.
Now, obviously, this is a slightly bigger problem, but is this to do with white privilege? No, it's obviously not. If she looked more Asian than she does white, it would probably be the other way round. Her white father would be questioned when she is going through security with her dad, and all the same assumptions would apply. In fact, the assumptions would probably be worse, because when it comes to men, there are way worse assumptions made than if it were a woman. And obviously the evidence of this is that at the beginning of this segment, she clearly said, oh, I look more white than I do Asian. Everyone says that. So, of course, when this white-looking woman goes through security with her Asian mother, there's going to be a couple of raised eyebrows. It's, hang on, why is this white girl with this Asian woman? And then when it's clear that the passports aren't fake, they probably say, okay, fair enough, on you go. And absolutely nothing comes of it. But no, the assumption has to be racism, and this is what they're trying to pass on to kids, to just assume that everything bad that happens in any non-white person's life is all down to racism. That is exactly what they're trying to pass off to the kids, while at the same time trying to imply that white people are terrible. That is the whole point in this, and the BBC are complacent with it.
People who are white and that have experienced having the white privilege, what can they do to help?
I mean, as is completely standard with these types of panels, there's no questioning of, are you actually sure that this is down to racism? Are you sure, as I've just gone through with that security check story, are you sure that's all because of white privilege? Couldn't it just be because you look a lot more like your dad than you do your mum? With Kahindi Andrews, it's like, okay, you're finding it hard to find plasters and crayons in your skin tone. How is that really a problem that is due to racism? Isn't that just due to the fact that we live in a majority white country, and therefore when you are selling things like plasters, they are going to be more likely to sell white skin-toned plasters rather than black skin-toned? Just anything to push back on it, but no, it's all just completely accepted as fact. And they go on to say, oh, so these really bad problems where you can't find this crayon that you're looking for, how can white people help? Because the implication is that it's white people's fault.
I would say that a really important thing to do is try and really, really listen to when non-white people are explaining something that might have happened to them. And always do your best to look out and to see if they're being treated differently, and step in if they are.
Yes, effectively they want white people to turn into Ali G, saying that if for any reason a black person they perceive as being treated differently to a white person, they have to say, is it because he is black? And don't get me wrong, I am perfectly fine with saying to people, listen, I think what you did there was down to racism, and I think that's a bad thing to do. Obviously, wording it a hell of a lot more naturally than that. But the thing is, especially with Britain, is that when there is racism, it's basically never towards black people. And if there is, like the Met Police has plenty of examples of it, then it appears to be dealt with quite rapidly and quite harshly. Which I am perfectly fine with racist cops being kicked out of the force, that is absolutely fine to me. But let's not pretend that these problems aren't being dealt with at all, which is exactly what this video is again trying to imply.
It's about what you do and what you learn and how you take steps to make sure that you are there for other people who do suffer because of white privilege, and doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's about what you do from here and how you learn to learn and how you support other people.
I mean, again, this is the mot. They're trying to show you the mot here, but as I keep going in with the underlying implications, the Bailey is absolutely mental. Because all that woman said there was, oh, all white people need to do is send thoughts and prayers. That's effectively all she said there. When in reality, if we were to actually try and fight white privilege in the way these people would want to, you would basically just see a load of homeless white people on the streets. Because they effectively want white people to give up all of their jobs so that black people can take their place. Because that would apparently be justice for slavery. That's all this black grievance studies comes down to. That's all critical race theory is about. And we have scores upon hundreds, in fact, of citations to show that is the case.
If every person was to go out and teach one other person about what they've learned about white privilege, then we will just be one step closer to having a more equal world.
Yep, there we go. That's what this is really all about. It's just about indoctrinating people. We need people to go out and indoctrinate others, as many people as they can. Otherwise, we will constantly have a racist society and black people will never get anywhere in life. So the text in this article is no better than the video. In fact, it's probably a little bit worse, if I'm being honest with you. So you might have heard the term white privilege. Lots of prominent people, including chat show host James Corden and England manager Gareth Southgate, have referenced it in the past. I mean, the implication there, of course, being, look, all these people with really high status that a lot of you respect, they understand the term white privilege, and you need to be more like them, in which they are effectively just cutting their own arms with white privilege. These comments came following the death of an unarmed man named George Floyd after he was stopped by police in Minneapolis, USA. Again, yes, by law, it was a murder. In reality, I think it would actually be quite hard to try and claim that. But what exactly is white privilege and where does it come from? Well, here's Kahindi Andrews again to explain it to us.
White privilege is being able to not have to worry about racism. So you don't have to worry about whether the teacher's going to treat you badly because of the colour of your skin, or that's why you got stopped and searched, or you didn't get the job because you were black. And this is like the kind of daily experiences that we have to go through.
See how crazy the difference is between the introductory video and this video? It's gone from, oh, white privilege is when you find it slightly easier to find the crayon colour you're after to match your skin tone, and it's jumped all the way to, oh, white privilege is when you don't get stopped and searched, and when teachers don't treat you badly because you're black. And again, report after report after report can come out about racism in Britain, and they all simply show that either it is completely overblown, the systemic racism we have in Britain, by these racial activists, or if there is any, it's very small scale and it is in fact just through a few bad apples. But even with those particular reports, the black activists will take them and run with them and say that they are saying something that they are absolutely not. Oddly enough, a bit like climate change activists.
Because of the way that racism works. So white privilege is the freedom to be able to not do that. Also, because there are really quite big inequalities, also white privilege means that the people who make the laws, the people who run the schools, people who run the businesses, tend to be oftentimes white.
This is the main reason that they go on about white privilege, by the way. The only and real reason that they go on about it is because they simply want a country where white people are not in charge. They don't want to see white people in these places. They are, I know the old meme goes that they're the real racists and it doesn't get you anywhere, but it is clearly true, because the underlying implication, again, is that, there are white people in these positions and they are necessarily racist. They are bad people. That is the implication. And therefore, if we had black people in these positions, the black people would be absolutely fair. They would be... I don't even think they'd agree they would be race blind. That's the thing. They don't agree that black people would necessarily be race blind. They just want black privilege. But because in reality Britain is so, just quite frankly, anti-white and pro-black at the moment, they have to go to these absolutely ridiculous assertions and these ridiculously benign problems to try and claim that white privilege is absolutely everywhere, and therefore that is the reason to effectively replace all white people at the head of companies and in government with black people. And of course the mot is that they think black people will be more race blind. The Bailey is of course that they just want black privilege instead. Everything they say about white privilege, just think of it in this way, everything they say about white privilege, in reality they actually just want for black people. And it doesn't matter what reality reflects. All they care about is the result.
And, have the privilege to make laws and to keep things the same. So one of the reasons that things don't change as much is because the people in power have white privilege and use that white privilege to keep and maintain their higher status in society.
So the BBC have literally just come out and effectively said that most people in government, most people in chief executive positions in big businesses, they're all racist. That's essentially what has just been said on CBBC to a bunch of kids who are trying to be informed on current events. And trust me, that is going to influence their worldview, and it is not going to make them smarter people, because it is simply not true. We've had a government that has for 13 years overseen a country while enforcing the Equality Act, enforcing hate crime legislation, allowing at this point 1 million gross migrants a year while allowing 50,000 illegal migrants to cross the border, and that's just from the people we know, by the way. The way that the ONS tries to work out how many immigrants are coming into the country is they effectively just go to the airport and ask people in the arrival section, are you planning on staying in the country and are you a foreigner? I don't need to go through the whole methodology to tell you why that is a bad way to work out statistics, because if you look at the housing market, they say that there are more people than the official figures show. If you look at supermarkets, profits and their revenue, they're telling you that there are more people than the official figures show. So yeah, we are not in a world of white privilege. Britain is not a country of white privilege, and if you think that's just because you're finding it hard to find a black skin-toned plaster, then you are nothing more than a charlatan. Anyway, that is apparently what white privilege is. It's simply the fact that white people are terrible. And the text says, if you look it up in a dictionary, white privilege is described as people with white skin having advantages in society that other people do not have. But what exactly does that mean? Kehinde Andrews is a professor of Black Studies at Birmingham City University and leads the Black Studies Association. Ah yes, a good impartial voice. Thank you for letting us know, CBBC. For me, white privilege is the benefits that you get from being white. If you are an ethnic minority, there are certain disadvantages you have, he said. For example, it's a fact that you're more likely to be unemployed. White privilege is not having to deal with racism. Also, apparently, if you're a Hamas terrorist, you are more likely to be able to get a London council house. According to the most recent government figures, over 6% of people who are unemployed in the UK are non-white. That's compared to 3.6% of the white population. Which, if you want to spin it another way, you could say that that means that white people are less lazy, but they're obviously not going to say that because white people are vile. That's not me making that argument, by the way. I'm just saying that these statistics are not particularly useful for trying to prove white privilege exists. Because, I mean, for God's sake, something like nearly half the council houses in London are given to people who are foreign born, and not even British citizens, by the way. It's just absolutely crazy to think that the government in any way is pro-British, let alone pro-white. Because the ideas of racism, they're completely foreign to Britain at this point. They were foreign to Britain in Enoch Powell's day. There's those infamous infomercials that white American soldiers had to watch that basically said, look, Britain isn't like America. They will literally invite black people around to their houses and they will be seen on the same level as white people. The Americans had to be told that during World War II Britain. It's just absolutely crazy to think that white privilege exists in Britain, even at any point during the 20th century. Interestingly though, Newsround do put up the classical definition of racism, in that it's not saying that racism equals power plus prejudice, it is literally just saying that it is just treating someone differently because of their skin colour. But they also widen it a bit to even include religious garbs and things like that, which obviously doesn't come under racism. But still, I think it's good that they are using this version of racism. Then again, they are clearly trying to use this article as some kind of mod, but they're letting the Bailey out in quite a few ways, and it's making it pretty uncomfortable. And to be honest, that's just going to confuse kids as well, but that's a different issue, to be honest. Courtney Ahn is a Korean-American designer from Portland in the USA. My god, if only she could be more like Andy No. Her guide to white privilege attracted over 719,000 likes on social media site Instagram. She told Newsround what white privilege doesn't mean or suggest that you've had an easy life. I mean, let's hear that from the horse's mouth.
White privilege sounds exactly like what it means. It's the privilege that you gain by being white or white passing in your community.
Again, this is another, let's be frank, white passing person who is going on about how their life has been terrible because of white privilege. I mean, it's no surprise to me that she is from Portland. Portland seems to be the absolute cesspit of American leftism. But you're not giving a good definition if you're just using the same words that are in the actual word you're trying to define. So please do try and expand.
And I'll start off by saying that white privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It doesn't mean you haven't experienced prejudice, hardship, or earned your successes, but it does mean that your life hasn't been harder because of your skin tone.
In America, you could argue that there is a bit more of a case for that. I say could argue. I think at this point America has gone the way of Britain and is going a bit too far the other way. But I know for a fact that my life has been made harder because I couldn't, ironically, apply for a BBC journalism job because I was white. There are plenty of recruiters out there on TikTok who are openly stating, look, if you are a woman, gay or black, or just not white, just not a straight white male, this is the best time to apply for jobs because absolutely every company wants you to help with their statistics. It's just incredible how you have to use these really, really weird anecdotes from people complaining that white privilege makes everything easier for white people, and yet for white people they can literally point at job applications and recruiters and all sorts of things in life and say, look, this is actually where I've been discriminated against. Can we agree that this isn't fair? But these racial activists will never admit that it's not fair because they effectively see this whole thing as ethnic revenge. Almost as payback for all those years of slavery, which, I mean, at the end of the day, who freed most slaves throughout the 19th century? Oh, it was white British people. What a surprise.
And I think a key part in understanding white privilege is really understanding the term privilege and what that means. And that privilege can feel so subtle and go actually completely unnoticed because many of these things that are privileges would be considered natural affordances to you for just existing in a community and being given the respect and compassion you have as a human being.
I would love to know where in Britain you are not afforded the same respect because of your skin colour, rather than something that is a lot more notable in Britain, such as your class, or such as the city that you are from. For example, people from Manchester absolutely hate people from Liverpool and vice versa, and that's pretty much true for every neighbouring town in Britain. Things like that clearly matter a hell of a lot more than skin colour in this country, and so it is really annoying to constantly hear that, oh, white people get special treatment in Britain when, I mean, fine, okay, I might find it a bit easier to find a plaster matching my skin tone, sure. I don't think that constitutes having an easier life when I literally couldn't apply for jobs because of my skin colour.
You know, not being harassed while having a barbecue at the park with your family, not being profiled in stores and communities that others may see you as an outsider to.
Oh no, this is the argument for why we need more BAME walkers throughout the UK, because nature walks are just for white people, apparently. Again, I would love to see some sort of video recorded anecdote from one minority in the UK who was harassed while they're on a nature walk. And again, when stop and search powers came into London, stabbings went down. Clearly it works. And there's even been quite a few videos of police searching white people and finding zombie knives in their bags as well. So it's not just a racial thing. It's quite clearly not just a racial thing. But no matter what, BBC Newsround will try and push it because White people need to understand that they're evil. That is the end goal of this. And it's being sent to children, for God's sake.
Getting pulled over by the police and not fearing for your life, and just statistically being more likely to be born in a higher income home, live in safer areas, have better access to schools, resources, housing, you name it.
White working class boys are the most left behind cohort when it comes to education in Britain. They're being failed by society completely. But apparently they've got white privilege because crayons and plasters. This whole white privilege argument from the Blacktivist side, it does not come from a good place. It comes from a place of envy and revenge. They've seen in history that, yes, white countries had it way better than other countries because Europe advanced way quicker than anywhere else. And they assume because every empire had a pro-their-own-country policy, that meant that they were supremacists, when in reality, that is simply what every single country in the world has and should be doing, apart from obviously modern European and American countries. So the article continues. UK government statistics also show that between 2018 and 19, black people were more than 9 times as likely to be stopped and searched by police as white people. And from what I understand, there are quite a few successful stop and searches, so it's almost like saying, oh, they're finding a lot of criminals via this tactic, but it's rooted in racism, therefore it should stop. Well, the thing is, if it's stopping criminals, I don't particularly care if you do see it as racist. A quarter of the UK prison population is made up of non-white people, despite them only representing 14% of the whole population, yes. Well, given that in London, black people commit 45% of the knife crime, it's actually not particularly surprising when you look at the rest of the statistics, because this is just the assumption that for some reason every community in Britain will act the same. Obviously not every community in Britain acts the same. And obviously in some communities, violence is more acceptable than in other communities. Really just saying to kids that a quarter of the prison population is made up of non-white people, which is a higher proportion than the general population, isn't telling them an awful lot, because you need to compare it to reported crime statistics as well. Because again, the implication here is that white people and non-white people are committing violent crimes or jailable offences at the same rate, and in reality that's probably not true. But the BBC article doesn't go into any more detail, because they're trying to pass along a narrative here. And my lord, does it get worse. Where does the term white privilege come from? According to Professor Andrews, the term white privilege was first used by a black American writer called W.E.B. Du Bois in 1935. Even if you're poor and not doing the best in society, there's still this benefit you get from being white, Professor Andrews explains. Du Bois used it to explain why poor white people didn't want to team up with poor black people to help one another after slavery was banned. I think that might just be more because of America being a bit more of a racist country, but I mean, yeah, I don't think that's because poor white people in society had a privilege that poor black people did not. I'll just be honest there. On social media site TikTok, the Check Your Privilege hashtag has been searched and viewed over 9 million times. In the challenge, a white person and non-white person compare their experiences in society by putting up their fingers and thumbs and putting one down every time something applies to them. The American dancer Twitch, who is black, and his wife, Alison Holker, who is white, went viral after their attempt, and here it is.
Check Your Privilege edition. Put a finger down if you have been called a racial slur. Put a finger down if you've been followed in a store unnecessarily. Put a finger down if someone has crossed the street to avoid passing you.
Now, the first one, I mean, obviously, having racial abuse hurdle you, I have absolutely no problem with saying yes, that maybe could be applied to white privilege in some way. But again, as I've gone through, there are many reasons why you could have been followed around a store. You might have had a large backpack on, and guess what type of person goes around with a large backpack in a store? A person who's going to rob it. But obviously there are many other innocent reasons you would have a large backpack in a store, and so they are going around to check that you are actually not putting anything in the backpack. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to do with your skin colour. And crossing the street to avoid you, again, that's happened to me many, many times. To put that down to white privilege is just insane.
Put a finger down if you've had someone clench their purse in an elevator with you. Put a finger down if you've had someone step off of an elevator to keep from riding with you.
Again, the first one's happened to me, the second one, all that to me says is, has someone got off an elevator before you? Well, yeah, because they were on a floor before they got to mine. This is what I mean by it goes from such crazy benign stuff like someone got off an elevator before me to, oh, I was stabbed because of my skin colour. It's the Mott and Bailey thing. It's these really benign things that white people would probably say, oh, I don't know if that has ever happened to me, so maybe you're right about this, when in reality, a lot of the time it probably has happened to them, they just haven't noticed, and the only reason I've noticed is because they constantly have been going on about this for over 5 years, and I started getting hyper aware of everything simply to try and have these anecdotes. That's the only reason I did it. But if you say people do something because of your skin colour, all of a sudden people start listening to you because people want to eradicate racism, because for some reason it is seen as the ultimate original sin. When, in reality, when it comes to problems in the world, I really don't think racism is that high up on the agenda.
Put a finger down if you've been accused of not being able to afford something expensive.
See what I mean? Like, the amount of white people that have experienced not being able to afford something expensive, it's in the billions, probably. It's the old Jordan Peterson thing of when he's talking to the feminists, when he says, look, you are just looking at the men at the very, very top of society. It's the same here. Like, this woman is clearly at the very, very top of society. If she is privileged enough to say, yes, I have never not been able to afford something, she is either living in a complete fantasy land, or she is completely surrounded by simps who will pay anything for her. They are quite clearly faking this video. They are quite clearly exaggerating everything in this video to make it go viral, and it did go viral, and it's screwing up people's perception of the world, and the BBC just going along with it, saying, look at this, the black guy has absolutely no privilege whatsoever and the white woman does, and not even doing another progressive stack thing and saying maybe some of these things is because she's a woman. No, they don't say anything like that, because all this is pure propaganda. This is pure anti-white propaganda from the BBC.
Put a finger down if you have had fear in your heart when being stopped by the police.
Again, that's probably a lot different in Britain, because obviously in America the police are armed, and over in Britain they're not. So I don't think a lot of black people feel fear in their hearts when they're stopped by police. Unless, of course, they're armed police, but apparently in the most recent anecdote of that, they're not that scared because they still try and ram them.
Put a finger down if you have never been given a pass on a citation that you deserved.
What the hell does that mean? Does that mean put a finger down if you've never been let off lightly for a crime? Is that all that means? Because I do not believe that. I do not believe that this guy has not been let off from a traffic violation.
Put a finger down if you have been stopped or detained by police for no valid reason. Put a finger down if you have been bullied solely because of your race. Put a finger down if you have been denied service solely because of the color of your skin. Put a finger down if you've ever had to teach your child how not to get killed by the police. Any fingers left? That's privilege.
That last one about teaching the child about not having to be killed by the police, I don't know why the mother didn't put a finger down. Obviously, if the father would have had to put a finger down, and the only reason he didn't is because he ran out of fingers, then the woman would have to as well, given it's the child's mother. Which is why I simply don't believe a single thing the black guy did with his fingers there. I mean, to be fair, I believe a couple of them, obviously, but I obviously just mean the more benign ones. But even the benign ones, I'm questioning. It's like, how do you actually know that was because of the colour of your skin? But as mentioned, this video went viral, and all it is doing is skewing people's perception of the world. It's making them think that racism is absolutely everywhere, when in reality they're probably just lying. And the reason they lie is because it makes videos like that go viral, and in the end gets them more status, more attention, and in a lot of cases more money. That is the main reason that a lot of people go on about this, because it raises their status and their income. So next up, the white kids are being told what they can do with their white privilege. They can teach other white folks the barriers to success for people of colour, promise to listen to and amplify the voices of people of colour, be more than not racist but actively anti-racist, and confront racial injustices even when it's uncomfortable. In other words, they effectively have to be the blacktivists' ideological slaves. They are literally not allowed to have any critical thinking for themselves. They literally just have to listen and believe to black people and berate anyone else who doesn't fall in line with that ideology. This is being taught to kids. The age range for Newsround is something like 8 to 15 or something like that. Probably a bit younger than 15, which, by the way, makes this even worse. But in the end, what this creates is people who end up coming out of university and just being complete ideologues. I know plenty of people who've come out of university who... I know doctors who went to Cambridge who believe in cultural appropriation. I know people that did nursing at university where all they're really supposed to know is how to deal with people on wards, and they go constantly on about cultural appropriation, white privilege, and that they have to be anti-racist. They have absolutely no thought process behind their heads. And I think the worst one is someone who did biochemistry and falls for the whole trans ideology of we are all assigned our gender at birth. And this is the thing. As mentioned at the start of this article, originally the kids will hear the term white privilege and learn of the concepts from something like TikTok or from a celebrity or something like that. And then when they hear it from someone with actual authority, say a teacher or BBC Newsround, that is when it starts forming as a coherent thought in their head, and that's really when they start solidifying as an ideologue. And this is absolutely why parents should be involved in their kids' education, because if they are simply becoming ideologues from schools, and the schools are effectively telling the kids to hate themselves for their skin colour and their parents for their skin colour, and other people obviously for their skin colour if they're black, that is obviously a huge issue, and one that needs to be dealt with, and one that obviously the Tories have had 13 years to try and deal with, and the problem's got actively worse. If you're going to protest vote, please vote Reform. Do not spoil your ballot. Going into even more detail, according to Courtney Arn, you should speak up if you see someone being treated differently because of the colour of their skin, adding that people need to go beyond simply posting support social media. Which, yes, a lot of this was just putting up a completely black tile on Instagram a few years ago when George Floyd died, and it did absolutely nothing. And I even actively confronted one of my friends for doing it. I was just like, why have you done this? And he basically just said, because I don't want people to think I'm just a racist Tory. Effectively, all he was doing was trying to signal that he is not a racist. That's all he was trying to do. And in my mind, that was completely pathetic, because I have conviction in my actions and I know I am not racist. Through my actions, I have never felt the need to try and actively say on social media, I'm not a racist. She encourages people to raise money for causes that promote non-white people and wants grown-ups to vote for people in politics who support non-white people's progress. Yes, she wants people to be complete ideologues. Professor Andrews points out that you shouldn't feel bad if you're white, don't take it personally. How are you not supposed to take it personally? You're personally insulting me. You can use it to your advantage because there are always certain things that white people can do that black people can't get away with. I would love an example of that. And again, when the example comes up, it's usually because they're rich, and rich black people have got away with the same things. UK government statistics also show that between 2018 and 19, black people were more than 5 times as likely to have force used against them by police as white people. And again, you need more statistics than just which ones have had force used against them. Is it a case of are black people 5 times more likely to use force against their police, say? Could that be a reason for it? Anyway, let's hear what Kahindi Andrews has to say.
So, an ally is somebody who uses their white privilege in order to help the cause against racism. So, might not necessarily think it's your issue or your problem, but you use the voice that you have to help out against racism.
In other words, an ally is a white foot soldier of the Blacktivist. That's all he said there. An ally is someone who does exactly as I say when I say it. That's not an ally, by the way, that is a pawn.
So that could be raising your voice when you think that something bad is happening. Don't be silent when you see the examples of racism in front of you.
Does that include having to go at store managers for not having the correct coloured crayons? Do we have to do that? Is that what it means to be anti-racist? Because at this point, being a Blacktivist pawn just seems really, really petty.
Also, one of the things that, in terms of an ally, especially for young people, is to really try and get a wider education. Sometimes in your schools, they don't really teach you a broader way, like Black history, Asian history, etc.
They don't even teach British history out of the Tudor times, Guy Fawkes Night, and World War II. And even then, when it is World War II, especially when I did it, it was mostly simply about Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, with some bits on the Battle of Britain. Realistically, most of my history education has come from outside of school. And I don't even think I had a bad history teacher, by the way. I don't think any of my history teachers were bad. I think it's just the national curriculum for history is absolutely awful. I will always say this, the only thing we actually learn about the Georgian era of Britain in school was that slavery happened. And we didn't even learn that we ended it, by the way.
So some things you can do are read and try and learn more as well. Take responsibility for your own learning. So read books by Valerie Blackman or Angie Thomas in the States. Like a really excellent book I recommend is called Before X, about Betty Shabazz, the wife of Malcolm X and how she grew up in America. It's an excellent book. So there's lots of things out there you can do to read, educate, and to learn about the things which are happening today, and really the things happening in the world today. And that's kind of the first step to being an ally.
So the two things you need to do to be an ally is do everything that Kindy Andrews says and read everything that Kindy Andrews tells you to read. And in this case, it is apparently read a book about the wife of Malcolm X, which I don't know why he wouldn't just say read a book about Malcolm X. I mean, if this doesn't just scream liquidize your own brain to be my mindless zombie, I don't know what does. And the last part of this article is just repeating things we've already heard, but I think we've got the idea here. The further down in that article you got, the worse the entire just idea got. And again, this is being taught to kids. Kids are being taught that if you are white, you are a bad person. The only way to be a good person is to listen and believe and do as black people tell you to do. And this is why they are so vehemently against any black person that is against this type of nonsense, because by their own logic you have to listen and believe black people, and if there are black people saying don't listen to any of this stuff, then you're going to break the programming there, because the programming necessitates that ironically all black people are the same and suffer similar if not the same injustices. And obviously the world's a lot more complicated than that, and that's why when I recommend books, it's as factual books as you can get. It's not indoctrination material. It's not here's how to be a good British nationalist. It's simply here's a book on British history. You can take what you want from it. If you end up hating British history from it, then fair enough, but my God, you're going to be on the deportation list when I get in. But a lot of the time I don't think that's going to happen, because I think there's genuinely a lot to be proud about when it comes to British history. There's a lot to be ashamed about as well, don't get me wrong. But the whole point of this whole march of time, the whole point in us being here is that we take the good from history and we carry on with that and we change the bad. That is the whole point. That is the human story. And what these people are doing is taking history, saying absolutely none of it was good from Europe, and so we need a complete revolution to completely forget it, memory hole all the good stuff. It's black people alone who built Britain, who helped Britain become the nation it is today, who have done the only good in Britain. And that is obviously an absurd statement, but it is effectively everything that this ideology is basing itself off. So, in short, the BBC needs to be investigated once again, because this isn't the only time that they have put forward factual content that is full of incorrect facts or omitting important truths. But I've covered those things many, many times in the past. Don't pay your licence fee. If you want to teach your kids good history, just buy good history books for them. They are still being printed out there. You don't need to buy King Offa was black type books, which do exist, by the way. It seems to be the only way that you can give your child a good education on history. So that is what I'd suggest. For the rest of the time, I'm going to make a complaint to the BBC about this, because it is pure indoctrination, it is pure fantasy, and it is teaching kids all the wrong lessons about racial relations. So I would be very happy if you complained too. Anyway, that is everything I had for you today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.